The End of Prohibition, The Rise of Fascism, and Gangster Cheese. The release of Shadow Ticket is one of the biggest literary events of the year, and it's one of the biggest literary releases I can remember in my lifetime really being excited about, but also finding myself in a place ready to engage with. I just finished Shadow Ticket last night, and I wanted to talk about it. I'm going to do my best to make this in two parts. So the first part being more spoiler free, and the second part adding more plot details with my more specific thoughts. So if you're not interested in any spoilers, I'll try to block out that part of the video for you. This book takes place in 1932. It takes place at the end of Prohibition, the sort of end of the gangster period, and then the rise of fascism in Europe, and this sort of beginnings of the espionage culture that we see develop over time in the 20th century. Pynchon is really interested in depicting this particular moment, this transition, and he uses our protagonist here, Hicks McTaggart. He uses him as sort of the sort of focal point to indicate how really wild this transition is and was. Hicks is a private investigator. He's a former strikebreaker, but as the times are changing, his profession is changing too. But his big complaint, he really doesn't want to get pulled into any more domestic disputes. He doesn't want to be engaged in any investigating into people's personal lives and affairs. And of course, inevitably, he ends up getting wrapped up in one of the biggest missing persons cases of the time. Daphne Airmont, she's the heiress to the so-called Al Capone of cheese, this cheese magnate gangster guy who is sort of in hiding on the lam of sorts, and his daughter has absconded with a musician. Music being one of the other key themes in this book. Big band music, dancing, swing music, references to Count Basie and Cab Calloway, the specific dances of the time, and of course with Pynchon you get lots of songs. You get song lyrics. His they pop up in the book as they always do, and in this case, the music culture acts as another point where we can see how the times are changing. So Hicks ends up getting hired on to find this cheese heiress, and the endless unfolding of clandestine groups, the seemingly infinite disclosures and then subsequent disclosures into various minute government bodies and corners of espionage. It's Pynchon core, the machinations, the hidden machinations that are driving society and driving these governments, particularly as a sort of response to this rise of fascism. It's very much in Pynchon's wheelhouse. And as I was reading the book, this is something that I really enjoyed, and I was pleasantly not surprised, but it was nice to see, to confirm that despite his age, Pynchon hasn't lost any of his humor. He also hasn't lost any of his vitality. This book is incredibly energetic, frenetic at points. The pace is very, very rapid. Pynchon's sort of, quote unquote lesser works, these works that are a little bit smaller, Inherent Vice and Violent and Bleeding Edge, they all have this underlying, propulsion, this sort of forward motion that is impossible to stop. This is certainly true here in Shadow Ticket as well. The first half of this book takes place in Milwaukee, which I thought was really great. I think as a prohibition city, Milwaukee being like this beer city, brews a lot of beer. And also, it's the end of Prohibition. Like Prohibition, the end is in sight. And so at this point, even the illicit booze is like watered down and terrible. And, being sort of in the shadow of Chicago, being in the shadow of Al Capone, it creates this like warped view of Prohibition and the gangster period, this sort of diminished version of everything. Everything has sort of lost its glamour. Even the bar rooms, even the songs and singers and starlets, they've all got this sort of I don't know, maybe like a scummy sheen to them. I think in general, this book is a lot of fun. I thought the first half was a little bit easier to follow. The second half, the pace at which characters are introduced and the layers beyond layers that Pynchon discloses, it becomes very, very quickly. It becomes chaotic, and it becomes a little difficult to follow. So maybe the second half of the book requires a little bit more of the attention that his books tend to demand. But I thought the first half was a lot of fun. Sort of Pynchon's take on the hard boiled tropes of private eye stuff. I thought it was really great, and the second half was a lot of fun too. But I ended up losing the thread a little bit. I wasn't quite sure who was who. With Pynchon, all the names, it's easy to get confused, and people disappear and appear in different places, and we're not quite sure how they got there. So I think that's a lot to be expected when you're reading Pynchon. He certainly doesn't make it easy for the reader. As far as accessible Pynchon novels go, this one is certainly accessible. I'm not sure I would recommend it as a first read for someone who's never read Pynchon before. But if someone has attempted to read something and found it a little too challenging or a little bit too obtuse, maybe this is a good one to try to get a nice taste of Pynchon's style and the things he likes to write about. This will be where I put a spoiler warning. I'm not sure how much into specifics I'm going to get, but people have different thresholds for what they want revealed before they read a book. So this part is going to be more my thoughts of what is really happening in the pages, and if you'd rather read for yourself and find out, then here's your spoiler warning. So what really struck me about this book, as I mentioned, this transitional period, but one of the key bits that Pynchon lays really towards the beginning is that there's this submarine that has survived from the First World War and has technically never surrendered. It's unclear what exactly their work is, but they're transmitting to people, and they're sort of working behind the scenes with all of these government figures and gangster figures and stuff, sort of in between the States and Europe. And so while this book seems to be about a point of transition, having this submarine from the First World War that never surrendered as a key point, it seems to me that Pynchon is indicating that there really hasn't been any change, or rather, there hasn't been a the end of the First World War acting as an ending point, and then the Second World War acting as a starting point. It's all one big mess. Hicks's investigation leads him from Milwaukee to Chicago to New York and eventually to Europe. And this direct line, this pull, it's almost like a magnetic pull leading him into Europe, leading him into the heart of, the oncoming fascist regimes. It seems like there's some magnetic force, there's some power that is drawing this web of espionage and clandestine groups. They're all sort of being pulled together into fascist Europe. And Pynchon makes it very clear that there's something happening beyond the realm of scientific comprehension. He describes episodes of apport and asport, physical items that seem to appear and disappear at will. Hicks tells the story when he's strike breaking, and his mace or his mallet, whatever he's going to use to beat somebody, at the point where he's about to use it, it vanishes. He sort of takes this as a subconscious thing, oh, I'm not supposed to be committing acts of violence. And then as soon as the strike is over, it returns to his side. And it turns out that this is a phenomenon that is occurring across the world. these items appearing and disappearing, seemingly at random. But as Hicks continues to investigate it, he gets wrapped up in a group that seem to be able to accomplish this feat at will. And so it seems that this group of people conducting these, apports and asports, these appearances and disappearances of items, this is like some sort of magical field that is spreading throughout the world as a result of fascism, or sort of together. They're like a pair. They're growing and spreading together. But there's something magical. There's something non-real that seems to appear or emerge as we get this emergent fascism. The big finale here, the big finale sequence, is this race or parade or marathon of motorcycles. But it seems like it's not just motorcycles that are participating. There's all this like transport. There's boats and zeppelins and all these like strange vehicles, it seems, are engaged in this like European, continent-wide tour. And as they travel, it seems like it's this machine of progress, the machine of society. And at this point, that machine is spreading fascism. And, to the characters in the book, this is very clear. And it's something that as they spend more time in Europe, it's something that they are attempting to avoid and escape. They're trying to, by the end, like create ways of like paths of escape from Europe. But in America, in the States, it's like this fad. They talk about fascist clothing, like the German uniforms being very fashionable. And at the very end of the book, Hicks is sort of contemplating whether or not he's supposed to, or he ought to, go back to the States, what that would look like if he did. The one trait that I consider very Pynchonian, and I'm not a Pynchon expert or anything. I've read most of his books, but I'm not like a scholar. I don't revisit all of his stuff. But one of the things that really stands out in his books to me is this sort of sense of paranoia, especially in the later stuff. And that is, to a large degree missing here. It seems that things are unfolding almost at a pace that the characters are always able to keep up with. There's never a moment where Hicks is feeling overtly threatened. It seems more that it's complications added upon complications, and he quickly sort of becomes resigned to, the people around him. He falls in with groups of different people who are doing different, investigations of their own pretty naturally. And so it seems like, again, this idea of machinery, even clandestine groups acting as part of this machinery of society. There's a lot more to unpack in this book, of course, even though it's less than 300 pages, but it is very like dense with references, and Pynchon's like scope and his understanding of culture and how society is changing and moving forward. He's so sharp. He doesn't seem to have lost any of his sharpness in this book. So it certainly deserves a deeper dive by perhaps someone who is better versed in Pynchon's work in general. And unfortunately, this seems to be the fate of Thomas Pynchon. He's a writer whose books, they all sort of have to be considered as part of like a greater work, for better or for worse. It seems like everything is sort of in conversation with each other. I don't know how fair that is, but I think the themes that Pynchon returns to and the way things are interconnected within his books, it sort of lends itself to seeing his novels as also having all of these connections. I don't think he is shying away from that. So if we're supposed to look at this book as an extension of his career and as another piece of his larger body of work, someone who is really, really deep into Pynchon would have a lot to say about this book, I think. My final thoughts are that this book was a lot of fun. I was happy to read it. I was happy to be able to see for myself what Pynchon has to say before any sort of outside influence could really get to me. I hadn't read any reviews or anything about this book before I picked it up. Having finished the book, this epigraph certainly makes a lot more sense. Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not. Or, in this case, cheese, perhaps not.